I'm Terry Shepard. Being a confident podcast guest is a skill that can be learned. And that's why I wrote How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. It's a sweet and short primer that teaches you about the gear, the appearance, and the messaging that can grab and hold today's micro attention spans and motivate your listeners to take action. How to Become a Dynamic Podcast Guest and Sell Stuff. The digital version is just $1.99 at Amazon. Grab your copy today and sell more books tomorrow.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
For more than 3 decades, Peter Fedorenko has been the quiet force behind the scenes in Hollywood. A professional screenwriter trusted with dozens of uncredited rewrites, he has shaped features and television projects alike, leading his craft to Medieval, The Fence, and Samson, just to name a few projects. The work of rewriting is often invisible, but demands precision, instinct, and a deep understanding of character under pressure, of deadlines from a team of actors, directors, and producers who are all in the search of the next blockbuster. Well, now, after a lifetime spent refining other people's stories, Peter steps forward with one of his own. His debut novel, Among the Living, is an epic generational saga that begins in the mud and terror of the First World War. At its center is a young German Jewish medic who survives the carnage of the trenches only to face a far darker fate 2 decades later. Peter Fedorenko, it's great to be with you. Thanks for doing this with me.
Terry, thank you very much for having me.
Back in Hollywood's golden age, it wasn't uncommon for a half a dozen script doctors to work on a story before the shooting began. How does that work now?
It's pretty much the same thing. A lot of original works, when they're turned in, by the time they get through writing and rewriting and everybody adding their 3 cents to it, a lot of the stuff is barely recognizable anymore. If you go back to the source material, sometimes it's much different. I'm not saying all the time, but that was my experience.
How do you approach a project like that when they say, fix this?
How much? My question is how much? How much and when do you need it? After 35 years of it, it became that simple. How much? And forget the back end and all that and the monkey points and what this is going to do for me. How much are you going to send me right now? That's the truth of it.
Several of the screenwriters that I've interviewed who have turned to novels have done so because they tire of the anonymity. Was that part of your motivation?
That had something to do with it, yeah. I wrote this, actually, that novel began as a 4-part screenplay for the BBC. And then COVID came along, our old friend COVID, and all the projects were put on what they call permanent hold. Okay, so that's what it was, originally a 4-part miniseries. Okay, and I still have it in screenplay form. And what happened was then I got sick with COVID myself, and I was in the hospital for 37 days in isolation. I actually died from it, and they brought me back. And when I got back home, I was on oxygen, and I couldn't really walk very well for almost a year. And a big part of my convalescence was novelizing that story, because I just really I didn't know what else to do with myself. And my wife, Carolyn, said, why don't you write a novel? And I said, what should I do? You've written all these things. Pick something and write a novel. And I said, maybe I should do the thing about the medic. And she said, yeah, that's a real good idea. Do that. So as simple as that.
How hard is it to make the transition from screenwriting to novel writing?
You know what, Terry? It wasn't hard at all because I had the whole story laid out. The hardest thing was the punctuation marks, the quotation. That was the hardest thing, was the format, because I didn't have a novel format. So I said, you've written screenplays, right? All right, so I just took the final draft and I put the whole thing in front of me, and then I took 10 pages at a time and just wrote it into what do they call omnipresent, or narrated form. Because I figured, I didn't know what I was doing, man. I read 1,000 of them, but writing one is a different thing. With the screenplay, you got the format there, you got the slug lines and the action and the character, and as soon as you're finished with one, it automatically goes to the next thing, right? But this, okay, but I'll tell you what I did learn that I used from years and more than 50 screenplays. I did learn how to get in and out of a scene. You know what I'm talking about. You're an author without going on endlessly. I did learn how to get in and get out while it was still interesting, hopefully.
We're talking with Peter Fedorenko. His debut novel is Among the Living. Your protagonist is a German Jewish medic who survives the war only to face persecution in his own country. What drew you to that tragic irony?
I saw a show on the BBC about trench warfare, and learned that most of the German medics, 75 to 80% of the Jewish medics on the Western Front in World War I were Jews. That's what they did. That was their service. Now, to be a medic, I was in the service for a very short time in the Marines, but I knew that the corpsmen and those guys you're unarmed. Okay, and these guys, what they did in World War I, their heroism is something that, like how can you imagine in the horrific scenario? So anyway, after I learned that, I said, wow, this could be the start of a really seriously dramatic story. Okay, I'm going to take one of these innocuous young medics, a kid maybe 19 years old, and I gave him a name, and I'm just going to tell a story. That he does something. I don't know if you've actually read the novel. Something happens in the beginning, okay, that ends up like affecting his whole life. I don't want to give it away to people who haven't read the book yet, but it's the most dramatic thing that I could possibly think of without going into outer space. Okay. The singular, most powerful mistake that I could think, or accident that somebody could make. And this thing that he does, he carries it through his whole life. After he survives the war, obviously, he goes back to Berlin, where he's from, and he becomes a very well-known medical doctor and a psychiatrist. And he's an important man. He's a very well-respected man, okay? And he believes, as many Jewish people did, that their war service would shield them from the Nazis. And unfortunately, they were very tragically mistaken about that. And so it's a generation, again, like you said, it's a generational story about this man and what happens to him and to his whole family, his wife, his sister. His brother was also a World War I soldier, a combat troop who came back missing an arm, and he gets tied up with the communist revolution in Berlin and ends up dying. And there's characters that are brought in and out of the story, and a lot of surprises.
Peter Fedorenko is our special guest. We're talking about Among the Living. What do you believe allows some people to endure the unimaginable?
They have a simple choice, either live with it or die with it. And again, this particular character, he doesn't, the real depth of his action as a medic, it's revealed gradually through the story without actually, there's clues. I give clues throughout the story of what's bothering him, because something is obviously bothering this guy beyond, what all the other survivors of the war had to go through. And we really don't know what it is. And you don't find out really what it is till the very end of the book. Okay, I kept it as a surprise. It'd be very hard to get if you don't know. But I don't want to give it away. I don't know. I better not. I better not, because it's a big surprise, man. It's a big surprise. So he goes and watches the Nazi takeover in Berlin. He marries a beautiful Gentile woman from Munich, and she ends up dying too. His whole family just perishes like so many did. It's really, I'm much better off at writing than verbalizing. There's so many layers to it. There's so much, man. The only not a problem, but what I faced with the book, I could have easily gone like 500 pages. But I talked to some people and I said, listen, on your rookie novel, if you go too much past 90,000 words or so, it's going to be very hard to get it published. Even though you've been a screenwriter, a lot of people know you, okay? But it's different. The publishing world is much different. And if you go into a lit agent or a big house, as you well know, with a 500-page manuscript, the first thing they're going to tell you is you got to take out 30,000 words. How do I do that? It's not like editing a screenplay. Well, okay, we'll just cut this scene down, or have them go somewhere else. You can't do that.
How do you balance brutality with humanity when writing about something as horrible as the Holocaust?
I'm going to tell you something, man. I wrote that book, and then I left it alone for a long time, because when I was done with it, I was just wrung out, man. I just didn't have any. I used everything that I learned in the last 30 years I put into that book. And when I was done, I didn't even look at it for a year. I just put it aside. And then I went back and started rereading it. I didn't remember doing it. I told Carol, honey, this is beyond my skill level. I don't remember doing this. She said, I remember, I watched you. And I said, this is too good for me. I'm used to writing scenes that last for a minute, 2 minutes. But I don't know. I don't know where it came from. It's maybe, I feel like sometimes maybe it was channeled. I don't know. In being an author, you know what I'm talking about.
There's nothing like the muse singing. When she sings, you have to find the keyboard and get it down.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, Carolyn and me, we put it up on the big screen. We're reading it on the internet, on the big TV. That couldn't have been me. How could I create? I can't do that. That's not my skill level, but there it is. And I don't know, I doubt if I'll ever be able to do a repeat performance. This thing it's dark, man. It's a dark story. And I talked to a couple of people, authors, like Donna, for one, and she said, man, if you're going to do something, you can't hedge with this. There is no hedging. How can you hedge trench warfare? You can't make it, it wasn't that bad. It was terrible, man. And what happened after that was even worse. And getting in that Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria was one of the most hellish things ever devised by mankind. And the guy, he loses his wife and his mother and his father. The selection comes, and him and his father have to make a choice: who's gonna live and who's gonna die. And of course, it's the father, because he's had enough, and he loses contact with his young sister. And she comes back into the story. She miraculously survives the whole thing. Okay, and just so many things. There's just so much, man. And it's difficult for me to try to describe what happens to this guy, because he's Job. He's like a modern Job. He's just, for whatever reason, and he questions himself through his whole life. Why do I live? Why? What is it? Why am I still alive? And so much is heaped upon him, and he's so strong, and his life is so tragic. But in spite of that, he comes out the other side, and he salvages his humanity. And that's really what it's about. It's about, the limits of human endurance. It's about the old adage, these old sayings that we've heard our whole life. We hear them because they're usually true. Like the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay, and that's what this story is about. One single act of bravery and heroism and the compassion that changes the world.
What do you hope that people will take away from their encounter with Among the Living?
It's a warning. It's a warning. It's a warning to keep your eyes open and keep your head clear and listen and watch what's going on around you. Because anybody that doesn't think that it can happen again, they're sadly mistaken. They're very much mistaken. And I'm not a very political person. And I just wanted to do a good work. I wanted to take everything that I learned from being a screenwriter and put it into a singular work that would outlast me, so I can leave something, and if a few people read it, that's okay. If a lot of people read it, that's great. But if my friends and a few people read it, and maybe it changes their life a little bit, that's okay too. I gave it to an older European lady, okay? A lady from Romania. And she read it and she told me it broke her emotionally. And I felt bad. I said, she said, oh my God. I just broke down completely emotionally after I read that thing. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. And I felt bad about it at first. And I thought, okay, then maybe it's successful. Maybe it's a successful story. You never know. I don't know, Jerry. I really don't. I don't know. The best that we can do, we put it out there and see what happens.
Among the Living is available right now. You can find it on Amazon in digital. I highly recommend it. Written by our special guest, Peter Fedorenko. Peter, thank you so much for the conversation.
Terry, thank you, man. It's been great. You're such a good guy, man.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.